Alright, we are going to create some mountain textures. To do so, we're going to use what's called a palette knife here. Just a little plastic kind of butter knife type of a thing here. And we'll apply some paint to the edge of it, and we'll kind of pick a side to start with, and we'll kind of just scrape downwards alongside that mountain. Now, if you have some smaller mountains, you might have to try to just use the very tip of it, but you'll get the hang of it. It does take a little bit of practice. So to begin here, I have a few different colors I've mixed. My goal was to first kind of recreate my mountain color that I had, and then I'm going to make it slightly darker version. You could also create a brighter version of this too if you wanted to create some texture with a highlight and a shadow area. But even if you just create one slightly darker color, it will still give you a pretty cool effect. Now, because these are circular kind of spots on our mixing tray, it's too hard to like scrape in there to scoop the paint up. So I'm going to actually use just a paintbrush, and then I'm going to just kind of apply it onto like my palette knife. That way I'm not going to get too much on there, and I'll be able to make sure I get it on my whole edge. Now, it definitely takes some getting used to. You could even practice on some scratch paper if you would like, because you kind of want to experiment with getting how much pressure to put down. You kind of want to just very lightly scrape across your paper. If I push down too hard, it will scrape away some more of that paint. So if you happen to get too big of a glob, you can just kind of scrape back over it and it will remove it. But go ahead, practice a little bit, kind of trying to get used to that palette knife, trying to get used to moving the paint around. And then when you kind of feel ready, apply a little bit more to the edge, and then we can give it a try. So one thing is important is to kind of decide where your light source is coming from. If my sun's going to be over here, I'm going to try to have this be the brighter side of my mountains. So then therefore I would kind of put the darker kind of textures on this side. And again, I don't want to just go sideways, I want to kind of go down that mountain. And it might take a couple attempts to kind of get the color to go on there. Now you can see it is a little bit darker. If I kind of continue to scrape over it, it will take away some more of that paint and kind of leave that rough texture that I'm going for. Okay. And really there is no right or wrong way to do this. Mountains are so different from one another, and you're never going to see a perfect mountain. So just kind of remind yourself that as you're doing this. So I want to kind of go along each little mountain though and put that little shadow kind of color on the left side of it, since that's where I chose to have my shadow be. Remember, it's okay to go down into those next layers because we will be covering those up next too. But you can see the more I kind of put this around, the more texture I'm starting to create. Then you could even follow it back up with some lighter colors, or even maybe some just plain white if you wanted to try to make it look like there was a snowy peak or something. But then do it on the opposite side. Just very gently kind of scrape across some of that white. This will give it that really kind of fun finishing touch. But it does take time, so be patient. If you're in kind of a hurry, it's very easy to glob on too much paint, and then you might lose some of your hard work from the previous visit. You know, worst case scenario, if you end up not liking what happens with this palette knife, you could just take your brush again and just repaint over it. But experiment. You don't know until you try. Have fun.